like a participation and all energy after lunch, right? Just to start our afternoon, rise and shine once again, ladies and gentlemen. If you have been, please clap your hands. Thank you very much. And how about another big round of applause, please? Woo! ขอเสียงปรบมือดังๆได้ไหมครับ ยอดเยี่ยมมากครับขอบพระคุณในความร่วมมือฮะจริงๆแล้วเนี่ยผมได้รับการร้องขออยากจะให้นำทุกท่านลุกขึ้นขยับร่างกายแบบเต้นด้วยซ้ำนะฮะแต่ว่าทางนี้เนี่ยเพื่อความสะดวกของทุกท่านเองนะครับในช่วงของกิจกรรมหลังจากที่เรารับประทานอาหารกลางวันมาก็ให้เป็นการปรบมือก็แล้วกันขอบคุณทุกๆความร่วมมือนะครับเป็นยังไงบ้างครับ How do you enjoy your lunch ladies and gentlemen Very good right So once again, welcome back to EO Pro League Episode 1 Matching and Dealing. You're still with me, C Game, your host this afternoon. เอาละครับและในช่วงเวลานี้เราจะกลับเข้าสู่เนื้อหาสาระสำคัญในช่วงบ่ายเช่นเดียวกันนะครับที่เราจะได้ยกระดับของผู้ประกอบการโดยเฉพาะในภาคส่วนของการแสดงสินค้านานาชาตินะครับอุตสาหกรรมนี้ที่ถือได้ว่าประเทศไทยของเรานั้นมีศักยภาพรอบด้านเลยทีเดียวนะครับแล้วก็เช่นเคยนะฮะเราจะยังได้พบกับคุณเทซี่นะครับที่ในช่วงบ่ายนี้เราจะพูดคุยแล้วก็เน้นย้ำกันเปิดโอกาสให้ถามตอบกันโดยเฉพาะในเรื่องของกฎหมายนะครับโครงสร้างสำคัญทางกฎหมายในการทำสัญญาร่วมลงทุนกับผู้ประกอบการต่างชาติ and welcome back to the stage once again our moderator คุณเทซี่ welcome back and a big round of applause to welcome Tazy Guten Tag
hold on I think I still now is the microphone on perfect thanks a lot for the applause. Thanks again for being back at lunchtime. With the applause, normally people do it to do polite. You know, we in Germany, we're doing applauding always in a very efficient way. Yeah, we have the efficient applauding, and I want to show you what efficient applauding is. Can this table please do some applauding? Can you show me how you applaud? Yeah, please do applaud. Perfect. Continue. Can you join, please? Applaud. Can you join, please? And can you join? Okay, the right-hand side is applauding. No, not you. Only the right-hand side. So can you applaud? Please, this table, applaud. Come on, show me. This table joining in, this table joining in, this table joining in. And when I say the German word stop, you stop. So keep applauding. Come on, guys. Stop. Very good. This side now, can you please applaud? This table, chat, come on, show me that you can applaud. Can you applaud, please? You can do it. And when I say stop, you joining in, please. Stop. This is applauding. Okay, this is German efficiency when it comes to applauding, and it's also good to wake up people after lunchtime. The session now we are talking about is structure. Can I have my slides? Perfect. Structure is, we talked in the morning, we talked about, what did we talk in the morning? Can you remember? Yeah? The models, very good answer. And then the second presentation was, what did we talk about in the second presentation? About the journey. And now we talk about the structure. Why is the structure important? Because every company has a different structure, and every company and your journey and your business model will depend very much on what the structure of the company is you want to partner with. So in this session, which we start now, we want to show you a little bit about corporate structure. I want to talk a little bit about the different types of corporate structure, and that we start learning to evaluate the pros and the cons. Every structure has a pro and a con. Some structures are very big, some structures are very small, and I hope that you can see after that to identify the roles and responsibilities of your potential partner and how to adopt this to merge your future partnership. Again, we have 3 people involved in the session. One is me, you know me by now. One is Zanit, you know Zanit by now as well. And one person is Nino, who was sitting there just 2 minutes ago. And he's hopefully back when it comes to the model. I think also, by the way, that session might be a little bit shorter than the journey session, and it might be a little bit shorter than the model session, so we might do a little bit making some time up. From the learnings in the introduction, we talk about departments and the high-level responsibility, and then about the description how the structural setup might influence the journey you have when you go into a partnership. And here on that slide, I show you a typical corporate structure. You are from Informa, I learned, so your structure is bigger than this, is it right? Who comes from a company which structure might be smaller than that? Can I see a hand? Who from you comes from a company which has a smaller structure like this? What about you? How big is your structure, or do you have less levels, less hierarchy? How would you describe it? How many people work in your company? 20. So then your structure is for sure much smaller. And some of the responsibilities like marketing, sales, some people might have a double responsibility. Maybe the IT person and the digital person is in the same department, and that for sure influence how you would negotiate and how you would define the responsibilities. Then you can have much, much bigger structures than this. Here on that side, I have some keywords like this is a typical company structure, C-level, so the board is normally CEO, CFO, COO, CDO, and so on and so on. Then you have human resources, legal tax. Sometimes human resources in smaller structures are outsourced, sometimes digital department is outsourced, sometimes the sales department is outsourced. How would a structure look when it's much, much bigger than this? Or another question first, how would you describe this structure? Does one word come to your mind how you would describe the structure? Do you have an idea? So, top down, exactly, top down. And you could call it also hierarchical, yeah? You have a boss, and then the boss has a couple of reports who are reporting to him. These are very often the directors, the director of the product department, and then the director, he maybe has managers, and the managers maybe have teams. So this is a hierarchical structure. And when you have, for example, you are Panada. Is Panada still in the room? No? She told me this morning there are different portfolios in VNU. Then you would have the product department, and actually many, many people below the product department in that structure. And that means you have structures in a structure. So you have, when you have the portfolio food ingredients, and you have the portfolio agri-technica, or you have like Messe Frankfurt, you have the portfolio textile, and you have the portfolio, what is another portfolio from Messe Frankfurt? Car shows, Automechanika. Then you have two different substructures in an overarching structure. What could happen when a company is so big that you have two different structures, which are so big, Automechanika and the textile shows, there could be companies in their own right. Yeah? There could be a show organizer in their own right. What happens when you have the situation that the substructures are becoming suddenly so big? What could happen then? Any idea? Yeah? Somebody said, It could be duplicate, very true, it could be duplicate. It could be also a different structure depending on the different requirements, but you very likely will have subcultures. So you have a company culture, and then you have subcultures in the company culture, yeah? So when you think about, when you negotiate your partnership, when you deal with a company, then you deal with different portfolios maybe. That means also you deal with different cultures within the culture. Read exhibitions. Do you think Reed Exhibitions London and Reed Exhibitions Thailand had the same culture because they were both Reed Exhibitions. Do you think that? No. Do you think the culture was different? Yeah, because there was a national culture coming in. So Reed Exhibitions London, clearly a British culture. Reed Exhibitions Thailand, for sure, an Asian, a Thai culture. Do you think Reed Exhibitions Germany and Reed Exhibitions London had a different culture? So two European countries. Do you think they had a different or the same culture? What is your guess? Different? London and Germany. What is the difference between Germans and Brits? Yeah, the main difference is British people have around 5 million polite filters between brain and mouth. Yeah, they have. And Germans have not a single polite filter, so they just say what they think. Whatever goes on here comes out here. And that irritated me a lot when I came to London. And I remember it was my first day. I worked for Reed Exhibitions in Düsseldorf, 6 years. So I'm typical German in a German culture. When I say something is not working well, I say, Zanet, this is not working well. When I think something was really bad, I say, Zanet, that was really bad. So this is, you see what you get. That is a plus point. Then I came to London, and we had a project. So that comes now a little bit to negotiation. Project was going on. I was involved. I was actually responsible for one part of the project. And that project went horribly, horribly in the wrong direction. So in a German meeting, I would say, that is shit. Yeah? This is really bad. We need to change that. I was sitting in a room with maybe 15 British guys. What did they say? Interesting. Interesting. Very interesting. And I said, yeah, did we match our milestones? No, we missed them. Interesting, interesting. And I was sitting there and I said, that's not interesting. That is shit. We should say it. Yeah? And then after listening 10 minutes to the British people, they're always saying, interesting. We didn't met this milestone. Oh, okay. I couldn't hold myself back anymore. And I said, guys, this is really shit. We should stop this. 15 people looked at me. What was the reaction? Interesting. Very interesting. Tesi, very interesting. Yeah. So I got totally nervous because I thought we are wasting money, we are wasting time, and nobody is saying this. For sure, English people say that as well. They just say it very coded. They say it in their culture. They say it in their words. My daughter always thought, why are people in London don't just say what they think? Life would be so much easier. And I give you another example. My best friend came to London. My wife is British, by the way, a cultural clash. So my wife said we go to, no, not you. Only we have been in London. My wife said, your best friend is coming, we go to Bluebird. Yeah? So we went, Bluebird. So we wanted to show my best friend a really nice bar in London. So we went to Bluebird, and then we were sitting in Bluebird, we had a cocktail, and then my wife said, Martin, what do you think about the bar? And he, I really don't like it, I really think it's shit. And she, and then later I explained him, the question is actually not if you like the bar, the question is, do you see that I put effort in choosing a nice bar for you? It's just phrased in a different way. And this is how cultures in a company and cultures in different departments can be very, very, very different. Coming back a little bit to our topic, I said in your negotiation phase, you need a project manager who understands all this, yeah? Who really can deal with it, who can do an interpretation when UBM Amsterdam is saying something and UBM Thailand is saying something, that can be the same thing totally different phrase. So the project manager sometimes is like a conductor in a big orchestra. It's a really hard job, but it's very important when you go through your partnership phases. So now we add even one more level to all this complication. We even add one more level. 5 minutes ago, I asked you, tell me one word of what this structure is. And you said hierarchical, top, down. Which structure did we have at Food Ingredients? Good question. Good question. Can you imagine which structure did we have at Food Ingredients? My Thai department at Food Ingredients, my Amsterdam department at Food Ingredients, my Brazil department. We had not only a hierarchical structure, it became really confusing. We had a matrix structure. What is a matrix structure? It's very powerful in the exhibition industry if you get it right. When I arrived in Amsterdam, I thought UBM and Reed must be the same. Both British companies, both 5 million polite filters between brain and mouth must be the same. But it was really different because of the matrix structure. In a hierarchical structure, let's say you have the board of directors, the CEO, then you have the president France, and then you have the president Germany, for example. What will the president France and the president Germany do in a hierarchical structure? The president France will make sure his business unit hits the numbers, is profitable, and gets the revenue. What will the president Germany do? He will do the same in a hierarchical structure. He will make sure he hits the number, he got the revenue, he got the profitability. It's their duty. It's their duty to make their business unit profitable. So now imagine following, imagine, and this is a live example, there is a show called ProSign in France, and there is a show called ProSign in Germany. What is the chance that these two shows work together from the structure? 0. 2 shows, one portfolio, if you want to call it portfolio, same name, but the structure doesn't give it that these shows can work together. Because the French president will say, why should an exhibitor from my show go to Germany? He might reduce the square meter in Paris. So it's actually negative for me if I work together with the German president. The German president will say exactly the same. I said, my key accounts there are in Frankfurt. Why should I align my sales process? Why should I align my marketing process? Why should I even talk to my French colleagues? It can be only negative for me. Because if the key account in Germany go to France, maybe they reduce their booth in Germany. So they have reasons not to work with each other, these two guys. Maybe there is a chance that these two guys meet in a hotel and have a beer together and like each other and say, hey guys, we should work together. When they like each other. When they don't like each other, they will not work together. Is it good or bad for a company? It's not good, right? It would be, it's not good. Reed exhibitions overall makes less money when it works like that. So there was one guy at UBM, he said, I need to change this. And that was a guy, he's not in the industry anymore. His name is David Levin, and he really changed UBM. And I think he has done a brilliant job with it. He said, I have my hierarchical structure top down, but I put a portfolio layer horizontally on a horizontal line. So coming back to my Food Ingredients portfolio, I was a portfolio director, and I told you a couple of times I had a team in Thailand. To whom did the team in Thailand report to? To UBM Asia, to Gandhi was the name. Legally a different company than UBM Europe. UBM Europe, one entity, UBM Asia, another entity. So when I talk about my team in Thailand, then it was even not in my company. It was in another company, this team, in UBM Asia. The same with my team in New York. That was in another company. So they didn't report to me direct. When I called my team here, Rose was in my team. You know it, she works now for Informa. When I called her, I only had a dotted line to me. But I still could talk to her, and I still could say, we push the portfolio food ingredients forward because we are one portfolio, and for that David Levin introduced budget rules. Some of them I said already is a budget is only agreed when both sides agree the budget. Very hard rule, sounds easy but very, very hard rule. Another rule was double accounting. Have you ever heard about double accounting? Double accounting is what happens when two business units go for a customer. What happens when two business units try to secure a key account and they both get commissions on it. If you secure the key account, you get $1,000 commission payment. If you secure the key account, you also get $1,000. So you will say, I secured it and it's my customer, so I need to get the bonus payment for that. You will say exactly the same. So there are permanently internal fights in the company. Who owns the key account? Who owns the client? Who gets the commission payment at the end? These fights are natural. They will never stop. You will never work together. When it's your key account, and maybe the decision maker is randomly a German guy, and you call me and say, Tazy, I want to sign up BASF. Can you help me? I look, do I get a commission? I don't get a commission. I have no motivations to help you internally. So it's a big internal problem with a hierarchical company structure. So with a matrix structure, David Levin introduced double accounting, partly still used in Informa. Partly still used in Informa. Double accounting means nothing else than you secure the customer, it accounts for both your bonus payments when you work together. You both increase your bonus target structure. It requires that you work out very, very, very clever commission payment schemes at the beginning of the budget years, but it stops all internal fighting who signs up for the customer. That is the reason, by the way, why we achieved up to 100% rebooking rate. When we went to our shows, we rebooked our whole show in for the next year. We were flying in the Chinese colleagues, the Thai colleagues, the Brazilian colleagues, the American colleagues. We pumped up our sales team. We went out on the show. We rebooked 90 to 100% of the show. That works because of the mechanism of double accounting. So you see that the matrix structure is very confusing to understand. It took me around 3 months when I started at UBM to understand this. I remember when the Informa people walked through the door in Amsterdam. I remember the meeting with Charlie McCurdy. We presented it to the Informa people, and the first reaction from Informa was, we really don't understand what you guys are doing, but we see that it works. So it took Informa also quite a while to understand what this double accounting strategy is and what this commission scheme strategy is, and so on and so on. So the negativity from a matrix structure, it is very complicated. The positive effect is you can grow your portfolio much quicker. UBM was always more profitable than Reed Exhibitions. UBM was always more profitable than Reed Exhibitions. When people asked me why that is, I said the matrix structure in the portfolio. Do you see how complicated a structure can be? But if you are the smaller partner, if you are the local partner and you understand this, you understand how the company is really working, then you will also understand what you have to expect in the partnership, what the international partner will expect from you, and you will be in a stronger position to negotiate how you think this partnership would work. So think a lot. It was a long example, but I find it so important. I have many German companies coming to me and saying, can you explain this, how that works? And it's still, I think, the matrix structure is the secret formula to make a show portfolio and to make a show organizer more profitable. Another organizer who is doing this even a little bit more extreme is Easy Fairs. Also a very profitable show organizer. Yeah? No? Okay, perfect. So far the importance of a structure. Do you want to step in for a second?
ก็ในเรื่องของโครงสร้างนะพอถ้าเกิดว่าเราจะต้องเข้าไปจอยกับคนอื่นเนี่ยเราต้องเข้าใจความสำคัญของโครงสร้างนะฮะอย่างอันนี้เป็นโครงสร้างของบริษัท organizer ทั่วไปขนาดกลางถึงใหญ่เนาะก็จะเห็นว่ามีจาก board director CEO ลงมาแล้วเสร็จแล้วก็ department head ต่างๆนะฮะก็ปกติก็ HR บ้างนะฮะ finance accounting นะฮะ marketing sales production หรือบ้านเราคงเรียก operation มากกว่าแล้วก็ logistics นะฮะหรือ project team นะครับก็อันนี้คือแบบ top down นะที่ทั่วๆไปเห็นเขาบอกว่าซึ่งแต่ว่าสมมติคนที่มาซื้อเราหรือมาจอยกับเราอาจจะเป็นโครงสร้างแบบนี้หรือโครงสร้างที่ complicate กว่านี้อย่างเช่นของที่ UBM ซึ่งทำให้มีกำไรสูงมากสูงกว่า REIT ทั้งที่จริงๆแล้ว UBM แต่ก่อนนี่คือเบอร์ 2 REIT เป็นเบอร์ 1นะก็คือว่านอกจากมีโครงสร้างแบบนี้แล้วเนี่ยเขามีสิ่งที่เรียกว่า matrix structure นั่นคือทุกประเทศมีโครงสร้างแบบนี้หรือคล้ายๆแบบนี้แล้วเสร็จแล้วก็มีคนที่ถือ portfolio อย่างคุณเทซี่เองแต่ก่อนถือ portfolio ของงาน food ingredient แล้วก็ทำงานกับทีมที่ทำ food ingredient ในประเทศไทยซึ่งอยู่ใต้ UBM เอเชียทำกับที่อเมริกาซึ่งอยู่ใต้ UBM อเมริกา UBM ยุโรปแต่ว่าก็คือเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยก็คือมีการทำงานทั้งสองฝั่งปัญหาใหญ่ก็คือเรื่องของคอมมิชชั่นนะครับว่าคอมมิชชั่นเนี่ยแล้วทำยังไงจากแต่ก่อนใครขายก็ได้คนเดียวนะคอมมิชชั่น 10% whatsoever เขาบอกว่าจากนี้ไปเนี่ยคือทุกคนร่วมกันทำงานแล้วร่วมกันได้คอมมิชชั่นด้วยกันนะครับทำให้ rebooking เมื่อกี้ผมฟังดูโอ้โห 100% rebooking 100% นี่หมายความว่าปีนี้ขายไป10,000 ตารางเมตรรันงานไป3 วันจบวันที่3กูขายได้แล้ว10,000นะจากนี้ไปมีแต่ growth ถูกไหมฮะเพราะฉะนั้นทุกปีมีแต่ growth นะครับเพราะฉะนั้นเรื่องของ structure เป็นเรื่องสำคัญที่จะเข้าใจคนที่เราจะดีลด้วยแล้วก็การเตรียมตัวเราเองให้ structure นั้นไปกับเขาได้
Okay, I apologize. I said this will be a very quick session and then I talk half an hour about the first slide. So sorry for tricking you. I promise the next slide will be quicker. Then important departments is various duties depend to different departments, especially government-related tasks. HR is sometimes outsourced. I said this already, and I think I described earlier also that departments in a partnership will be involved at a different time. So at the early stage, it's very often the strategy people of a company work together. If the company is small, the strategy person with the owner of the other side. I know one partnership where a big company is partnering with an association. The association always thought we are too small for this company until the strategy person met the CEO of that association who has a very big trade show randomly at a conference. Then show teams get involved, then the legal department get involved, then the finance department get involved, and then at the end the CEO get involved who needs to be informed during the whole journey. And local consultants come on board as well. That this all, with all these people, the two challenges on this journey with this complicated structure is to keep the spirit high, to create a project culture, and to keep it still confidential in the company, because these talks specifically when it's about a company joint venture or 100% acquisitions are very, very confidential. At the end, the CEO gets involved, who need to have a direct a direct lead to the project leader. So here we come to the project leader or the project manager position as well. It's a very specific position in the company because he needs to have a very good connection to all the involved departments. He needs to have a very good connection sometimes to very junior positions in the company, but he equally needs to have very, very good connections to the CEO of the company to avoid the mistake we talked about earlier, that the CEO is not informed about the process, comes in at a relatively late stage, and then is changing everything again. So that is an absolute essential person here. And then, the other things, external communication, confidentiality. A project plan and a project definition is absolutely essential that you do that at the beginning of the negotiation process. So that was a little bit the introduction of different company structures, how they will influence partnerships, how they can enable or block partnerships. Before I move to this, is there any question from your side? Have you ever dealt with such a big structure in a partnership so far? Did you had a project where you were dealing with such a big structure?
Maybe it's the culture of each, for example, from Korea and Thai, or in Southeast Asia.
Please.
Okay, it means that on Thai culture and another country culture, they have some unique characteristic. It's not the same, so it have to compromise or negotiate. But it's concerned about the relationship of each owner or each team that can be to relate in a new concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else had experience? Anybody else had experience with such a big structure? Do it. If you have, you are nodding. Did you have experience with your 20-man company? What was your example? Yeah. And how was the experience for you?
The communication is the main obstacle.
Yeah, in which way that you didn't know to who?
From sales, marketing, operation, production to finance.
And was it different cultures?
Different. In Europe, in Asia and USA, they're all different.
So in your project, it was a Thai company talking to a European company, talking to an American company?
Yes, we work with different continental timing, culture, the way of working, all different.
And did you had a similar experience like I had when I joined the first meeting at Reed Exhibitions? When you thought, when you didn't understand the other culture?
Well, now okay. In the beginning was tough.
Yeah? But you solved it?
Yes, I did.
Perfect. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is, when we go through some cultures, I just talked about the British example. What is with Americans? What could be specific to work with Americans? I work a lot with Americans. I love it. I love to learn from the entrepreneurship from Americans. But one thing I find always very specific working with Americans. Do you have any idea? Americans demonstrate enthusiasm through talking. Very easy. And when you have 8 Americans on the table and 8 Americans want to talk, the meeting takes longer. It's very easy. It's very easy. So I had a big project with America once, and I had many people on the other side, and we were always overrunning the meetings because they all had to talk to show that they are enthusiastic for very, very good reasons. There's another culture, they want to show their interest by debating. Do you know which that culture could be? This culture loves debating. Somebody? Golf?
Somebody said Indian?
India? No, I have somebody else.
French? No,
French, exactly. French. The French, they love debating. So when I say, hey, we should move to north, then they say, oh, maybe northwest is better. Yeah? So they like to debate this, but they're also coming from a positive point because they want to discuss it. They don't want to accept it. And so these are all the little things you need to learn when you come with a company from
And
another
do you know
culture.
that if you're talking Thai people,
What
and
is the Thai culture?
the Thai culture is, I don't really understand you.
As a German, I think you fully understand me since the whole day because you're all nodding, yeah? Because I think there is no... But how would you describe the Thai culture? Very polite?
We are too polite sometimes. That especially when we don't understand something, we will smile and laugh.
Yeah.
All right, and just go through that. And then if you, in a meeting, because you're the boss, we will try not to make you lose face. So we don't agree with you, but we will just nod our heads. But then you have to ask us later, individually, what we think.
And I said to this behavior, I said something in the morning. Do you remember? It's good that you have your own culture. Be proud of your culture. Many Germans, by the way, they try to pretend not to be proud of their culture. So a typical German thing is they try to talk themselves down, which I never understood. I think it's great when people are proud of their culture. I even find it interesting when people are proud of their culture. For sure, be polite to the other person, make compromises, but also find your red line when you say, stop, in my culture, this is not acceptable. This is what I said this morning, everybody's darling is everybody's idiot. For me, that is a winning formula to be polite, but to gain respect from your future partner. So to define this red line where you say in upcoming partnerships, I don't like that, what you do. In my culture, it is offending, yeah? Or in my culture, it is. As hard as it is to find this red line, try to find this red line when you do. Okay, perfect. Then the next slide is when we go through the different departments. And when you see it department by department, and you have the seller on one side, which is the smaller local company, and you have the buyer on the other side, then even that whole dynamic continues. You will find sometimes that this department on the buyer side might be 200 people. This department on that side might be 5 people. What is the difference when you have this scenario? They will have really good reporting tools. They will have the best pipeline management. They use maybe Salesforce, maybe Microsoft Dynamics, maybe SAP, whatever. They maybe use an Excel list. And it worked for them in the last 20 years. You find something like this finance reporting that was, in my former culture, was this very, very important. Actually, when I told my friends how we do finance reporting, my friends from other companies didn't understand why we are so deep in our finance figures. Our budgets were always, for my portfolio, were always 300 pages, easily. 300 pages with no text, only figures. Figure after figure after figure, page after page after page. My portfolio was 35 products, taking all shows and all conferences into account, a magazine, 2 or 3 digital products, turnover of around 40 million at this time. And remember, we had the budget rule. Budget is only agreed if it's agreed from both sides. So we had 35 budgets which had to be agreed from both sides. So that was a massive, massive, massive workload to create this every 3 months. So then we had the other side maybe, when we acquired a show, they did a budget in 2 hours. Again, maybe in an Excel sheet. So how do we bring these cultures together? This was something where we drew a red line. We said, if we acquire you, it will be our rule from that moment. We will teach you, we will train you up, but it will be our rule because we were so convinced that we are more profitable than every other exhibition organizer because of this philosophy to sell trade shows through portfolios and not through single trade shows. So that was a massive, massive post-merger integration task we had to do here on the finance side. When we had also a mechanism when the local business unit, what happens as a live example, when I say, I go now to another country than Thailand, when I say go to India, for example, I'm just picking the country out of the, and I say, okay, last year your show was 10,000, now you're telling me your show will be 20,000. Explain this to me. And my Indian colleague is a good guy, I like him, and he said, believe me, trust me, we will make the 20,000 square meter. Just trust me, it will be great, it will be fine. What does a big organization here would say to this scenario? They would say, show it to me in the figures. Show it to me in the reporting, show it to me in the analysis. I want proof that you can double the trade show. So then he's coming back and said, okay, Tazy, maybe you were right. I don't make 20,000 square meters, I make 19,000 square meters. So he's going down a little bit. And I say, oh, that's still not good enough. Prove it to me. I want to see your analysis. I want to see your figures. I go back to him. He will be a little bit more annoyed with me because two cultures are clashing into it. Two different cultures of how to read figures, how to analyze figures are clashing to each other. What could be a good process for this problem? Anybody an idea? It's a real-life business problem. You have an analytical culture and you have an emotional culture on the other side. It even doesn't have to be with India. It could be in a German company as well. It could be that one portfolio director is very enthusiastic, another portfolio director is more conservative. One portfolio director wants to show his commitment to the company by giving big budgets. One portfolio more wants to say, better under promise, over deliver. It's another budget philosophy. So if you go 3 times forward, backward, what has happened? These two guys don't like each other anymore. Very simple. This guy is annoying to this guy because he never believes him. And this guy is annoying to this guy because he always provides figures which are not underlined. What is in an international company a solution to this problem? Anybody an idea? I see you have an idea. You move your lips. Finding a third party
to come to be a
to solve this one problem. They are in a budget process. So you need to have in every budget process a mentor. So you go through a mentor process. Or finding the foul compromise, saying, okay, I say you make only 10,000 square meters, you say you make 19,000 square meters, why don't we say 14,000 square meters? That would be a compromise.
So halfway.
Halfway.
Okay.
Would be a bad budget, right? Would be already bad, but compromises, as nice as they are, in budgeting processes, they are ending up with figures you either don't achieve or you overachieve. So a bad compromise you don't want. If your board is taking financial reporting serious, you can't do any bad compromises. So the solution was for this problem, because the whole structure depends still on the fact that these guys like each other, that they can work together, that they can develop the show together. Otherwise, the whole portfolio strategy would not work. So the rule for that was, you give me a figure, I don't believe it, I ask. You give me another figure, I still don't believe it, I ask a 2nd time. You give me the 3rd time a figure, I stop arguing. I stop arguing, but I put For my CEO, I maintain a risk upside table in the budget process and said, the colleague from Thailand said they will do 19,000 square meters. I personally can't see it in the analytics. I put 7,000 square meters in the risk upside table on risk. So I stop arguing with you, so not to risk my relationship to you, but I report to my management, this is a budget figure, I see risk. And then whatever happens afterward is okay. Either you were right, perfect, we make more square meter. Or I was right, we had it in our risk upside table. So sometimes you need to have very creative solutions between big partner, small partner, or analytical culture, emotional culture, not to risk. At the end, business is always a product of a relationship between two people. And that is something you should never risk. And that way you can go through your whole structure. And this is how you can manage partnerships, or this is how you can manage portfolios. Do you want to step in?
Yep. ครับก็ในเรื่องของอย่างเช่นอันนี้เป็นตัวอย่างง่ายๆนะที่ทุกบริษัทคงต้องมีเนาะเราเป็นอยู่ในวงการนี้คือฝ่ายขายกับฝ่ายการเงินนะครับเขาบอกอย่างเช่นว่าถ้าเกิดว่าเป็นฝั่งผู้ขายนะฮะเราอาจจะมีเซลล์อยู่แค่ 4-5 คนในขณะที่ของฝั่งผู้ซื้อเนี่ยโอ้โหมี 200-300 คนนะครับมี Salesforce มีอะไรอย่างนี้ซึ่งเป็นเรื่องจริงผมจำได้ครั้งแรกผมไปBNU เนี่ยสมัยที่ยังอยู่BNUไปดูระบบเขาแบบโอ้โหมัน Amazing มากเลยขนาดที่ว่าผมบอกว่าวันนี้นะใส่ว่าจะไปเจอลูกค้าคนนี้กับคนนี้พอไปแล้วมันsuggestอีกว่าอ๋อนอกจาก2คนนี้อยู่ควรจะไปเจอคนที่3คนที่4ด้วยเพราะว่าอยู่ห่างกันอีกแค่5นาทีอะไรอย่างเงี้ยคือมันเขาระบบเขา Amazing มากในขณะที่ของเราเนาะเราก็นั่งดูเขียน Excel เปิดโน่นเปิดนี่เปิดนี่เขียนกันเอาน้องคนนั้นคนนี้ไปอันนี้เพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยมันก็ต้องมีระบบในการที่จะมาเชื่อมโยงกันนะครับเรื่องการเงินก็เหมือนกันนะครับของการเงินของฝรั่งเนี่ยแน่นอนเขาใช้ SAP เขาใช้ Sun เขาใช้อะไรอย่างเงี้ยที่มันเป๊ะมากในขณะที่ของบ้านเราเนี่ยจริงๆบริษัท Organizer ส่วนมากก็มีพนักงานบัญชีสักคนเนาะอย่างเก่งก็2หรือบางที outsource ด้วยนะฮะเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยในบางเรื่องเนี่ยทาง buyer นี่เขาจะบอกโอเคตัว standard หรือ compliance เนี่ยเขาขอยืนยันว่าต้องใช้แบบระบบของเขาแต่นั้นไม่ได้หมายความว่าเราจะต้องไปซื้อระบบนะเขาอาจจะให้เราใช้ระบบนั้นแต่ว่าเราจะต้องใส่ข้อมูลไปในรูปแบบที่เขาสามารถจะนำข้อมูลนั้นเนี่ยไป analyze แล้วก็ออกมาเป็นพวก management cockpit หรือ whatsoever เพื่อที่จะคอย monitor แล้วก็ตัดสินใจอะไรต่างๆได้
Thank you. So external factors, I was talking on the last slide a lot about internal factors and how you work with internal structures and with internal different characters and cultures and so on. External characters could different regions require to acquire the target via the local entity. I used the example in Qatar, where you need to have a Qatari actually officially owning the companies. Corporations without change of ownership can usually be fixed in an agreement. So when an asset is not going over the table or when a share is not going over the table, when it's a partnership to say we develop this show together, commission agreement normally to sales agents or entering a market normally, lower agreements or less revenue heavy agreements without any exchange of ownership can be in agreements which then can be also ended in a much easier way. And a share of deal includes always a risk for the buyer as well. It offers an opportunity, but I think that is really worth being aware for both sides. If we go into a long-term partnership and we stay together and we plan to stay together for a long year, then we get married to each other. And in every marriage, you will find out that you love your partner, you will find out that there are aspects you love maybe a little bit less, and you need to work on the partnership to make it long-lasting, and that is exactly the risk for the buyer. And then detailed description of a setup. Asset deal eventually does often not require to include all aspects. To organize a trade show, it's often more on the strategic level that these deals are worked out and responsibilities can be really divided. The local office is responsible for the operation, then what marketing and sales in my past or in my reality was very often simply divided, that the Thai team was responsible for acquiring exhibitors from Thailand and maybe Asia Pacific, or from Thailand and surrounding regions, whilst the headquarter team was responsible to acquire exhibitors from rest of world, which could be Europe and America. Same with marketing. Here, I said earlier, the ratio was often 80-20, depending on the show, but it's a good ratio where you say the headquarter or the international exhibitors should hit something between maybe 15 to 25. In marketing, the headquarter marketing team was responsible to bring in C-level from overseas to the show, whilst the Thai team was responsible to bring C-level and visitors from the region to the show. So you divide the responsibilities and then it's done. Then both sides can work in much more peace and can just execute the show. We went through the budget process in that case, like I just said, we said, we do a budget for a show in Thailand. The first thing we do with the budget, we split it in an international budget and into a local budget. The local team is working out the local budget, the international team is working out the international budget for sales, for IT, for research, for digital, and then we put the budget together. Again, we need to agree it, and then we present it to our C-level. So that was broadly the process, how we came through our deals. Content-driven corporations often need much more communication between the show because you need to understand the product better. When you do a content-driven partnership, then you really need. It is hard to define a USP of a show, right? Or companies who take it serious. Some show organizers have this USP simply, my show is a world-leading show, yeah? Or my show is a leading show in Thailand. That is not enough for a USP. When you take your USP serious, you go through a proper USP process, and that defines much more that both sides are coming together and really developing an understanding together. And in some countries, governments need to be involved in the deal, or you need to have an entity in the local market. This is a typical approval process for a big company. It's really from initial studies, start negotiation, due diligence, transaction, signing and closing. And that can take up to this 30 weeks. It can be also totally different with family-owned companies. It can be a decision in a day. I know one story that was unusual for a big company, and I can't tell which company that was, but I know one story 15 years ago around where the president from the local region called the CEO of the company and said, can I have 40 million? I want to acquire a show. And he said, go through the due diligence process, explain to me, why do you want to have 40 million? And he said, trust me, it will be good. I don't have time for all that. Give me 40 million. I want to acquire the show. The show was acquired and it was good, but that is a very unusual process. Normally it really goes through these steps to come to the final signing and closing, including all participants involved in the structure. And here I have one example how we rate this. So in this structure process or decision-making processes, we have a couple of different methodologies. This is only one methodology. I will show you more methodologies tomorrow in the due diligence session. But we had a skill matrix, actually, or we had a driver or a KPI matrix. And then we were simply listing all the internal KPIs we could think about, all external KPIs we could think about, and then we had sometimes also a map for all market KPIs. And then we were simply rating them, own shows, how do we rate it? Bad on a scale of 1 to 5, from very bad to very good. So we are not strong with our own shows when we enter in that market. So in that specific case, it was a matrix. Do we need to strengthen our market position in that specific region for that specific portfolio, for that specific industry? How are our resources? We rated this as neutral, that we say we have resources in the region, but we don't have a lot of resources. We would maybe overstretch our local office a little bit. Do we have skills? Or here I didn't have a good dot, so the skills dot would have been here and here. Are there any blocking factors? What could be a blocking factor? A blocking factor is maybe you have a partnership with a venue, and maybe the venue has an exclusivity on that sector already with another show organizer. Or a blocking factor could be you have a joint venture with another organizer, so you can't acquire a show in this industry if you want it or not. How strong, I think one dot he has moved down, how strong is our brand strength in that sector? Same with external, do we have any governmental programs? Can we expect support from the government? Do we have any technology trends? Political climate. Very, very interesting in our current times, political climate. Who would have thought that we are in China where we are at the moment? Who would have thought that Hong Kong doesn't have this massively big exhibitions anymore? Who would have thought that we had a government in America 3 years ago where some people don't feel happy to go there anymore? Political climate was a little bit not very well paid attention to, but that becomes more important. Economical client and what are the stakeholders. So that way we try to explain to ourselves what is our structure and what is the reality without us. With notes, all notes are deleted, but I talked about the team. You go through a partnership. These notes were discussed heavily with the local people. These notes were discussed heavily with the lawyers, with our own people, with companies who did research for us. So when we went through the exercise, we had a pretty good understanding internally and with our partners. Is it worth going in the partnership, or have we found any factors that more say, no, better don't go in this partnership? So that is one example I wanted to show you. Another example I wanted to show you is this here is a little bit the design of a deal. Phase 1, phase 2, I think I explained all these phases from information gathering. What I more want to concentrate is on this methodology where we said here, we say how good or how bad is an external factor, but then it might be the case that this is actually not so important, that internal factor. And that internal factor is much more important. So we rate it differently, but they have in our strategy a different way of importance. And that is something you could do to explain the situation before you go in a partnership. You could do it also for the post-merger integration process. You could say, from my partner, different departments, management, sales, marketing, digital operations. I went through the process with them. I say the management is okay. I think the management is good, but it's not brilliant. Then the sales, I think sales in my partner company, in the company I want to partner with, that is pretty good. Same with marketing. Digital is maybe average, and operation is good. Then, oh sorry, I explained the wrong way around. The weighting, here we start with the weighting. You say, is the management important for me? You say medium. Is the sales important for me? You say, yes, sales is very important for me. Marketing is very important for me. Digital is so-so. And operations is very important. So you first do the weighting from low to high, and then you do the rating, how good or how bad this department in your view is. So management is medium, important, and you rate it as poor. Yeah, you say the management is not working very well in this target company. Sales is super important for you, and the sales of that company is neutral. So it's not good, it's also not bad, it's neutral. Same with operations, you rate this as the weighting is high, and the sales is neutral as well. And then you can pick for which departments you would need to do a post-merger integration process. And in that case, you could pick here sales, because maybe you come from an extremely sales-driven organization, like my old portfolio, and you could pick here operations, because operations is very important. You rate it only with neutral, so you need to concentrate on that as well. So that is a methodology also to draw your red lines, where you said, if we want to go in a partnership, we need to work on this, and we need to work on this. I think your management in that example is not great, or you wouldn't say that to your future partner, but I leave it as it is, because it's acceptable for me.
ครับก็มีวิธีการคิดหลายแบบนะในเรื่องของการที่จะเอา structure มา merge กันหรือให้คะแนนนะฮะอย่างสไลด์เมื่อตะกี้นะครับไม่ใช่อันนี้นะฮะเมื่อตะกี้ก็คือว่าให้คะแนน internal factor แล้วก็ external factor นะครับอาจจะเป็นเรื่อง political อาจจะเป็นเรื่องความสามารถในการบริหารงานทีม marketing โน่นนั่นนี่แต่ว่าอันนั้นนี่คือออกมาแล้วก็จะได้พอจะเห็นคร่าวๆพอมาอันนี้เป็นลักษณะของการให้ก็เรียก weight ให้คะแนนต่อในแต่ละหัวข้อเรื่องเช่นนะครับเขาบอกว่าความสามารถในการขายเป็นเรื่องสำคัญเขาให้คะแนนเยอะนะฮะสมมติว่าให้คะแนนเอาง่ายๆสมมติว่าเรื่องความสามารถในการขายเท่ากับ2 แต้มนะในขณะที่การบริหารงานทั่วไป1 แต้มสมมติว่าความสามารถในการขายเนี่ยเท่ากับคูณ2ใช่ไหมแต่ว่าความสามารถจริงๆแล้วเนี่ยในการขายของพาร์ทเนอร์เนี่ยอาจจะเก่งมากนั่นหมายความว่าโอ้เจ้าเนี้ยเป็นเจ้าที่เก่งในเรื่องที่เราให้ความสำคัญคือเราให้ความสำคัญกับเจ้าที่ขายเก่งนะในขณะที่อีกบริษัทหนึ่งอาจจะแบบโอ้แมネจเมนต์ดีมากเลยแต่ขายไม่เป็นเรื่องเลยนะซึ่งในการทำงานกับเราซึ่งเราเป็นต่างชาติเนี่ยเราให้คะแนนกับคนที่ขายเก่งมากกว่าอย่างนี้เป็นต้นพอนึกออกไหมฮะเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยก็คือว่าคะแนนความเก่งแต่ละด้านเนี่ยอาจจะให้ความสำคัญไม่เท่ากัน
One example, and then I think I come to my last slide, is when I worked for Reed Exhibitions 15 years ago. Reed Exhibitions was famous for mergers and acquisitions. Reed Exhibitions became big through mergers and acquisitions. It was a relatively small company in the 90s, and they had so much money, they bought everything what was available in the exhibition industry, from Miller Freeman to Mack Brooks. In the reality of a company that is driven and that grows only through mergers and acquisitions, which department do you think have their high on their list for a post-merger integration process? It's not an easy question, and the department might not even be on the slide. Can you imagine one department that was high on the list of Reed Exhibitions for every post-merger integration process? Any idea? Business development was one of them. Yeah, we had the business development people in London and in Singapore were relatively close connected. Absolutely right. I had another one in my head, but it's absolutely true. The merger and acquisition team. Actually, in Reed Exhibitions, the business development people were actually not really business development people. There were more M&A people. So Nick Foster, Howard Klein, Geoffrey Bush, they were experts in mergers and acquisitions, in valuing companies. And the finance department. That was about Reed Finance, M&A, and business development. That was where Reed said, we need to have a post-merger integration because we want to know which numbers are coming from that business. And we don't care if they were good or bad with numbers in the past. We need to know the numbers. They were not interested in understand the local markets. They were not interested in understand why in Thailand this show was so successful and another show was maybe less successful. The headquarter in Richmond was not equipped with people to understand this. We had not many people in the headquarter. We had 100 people in London in the headquarter. Messe Frankfurt has 1,000 people in the headquarter in Frankfurt. So you see how Reed Exhibitions, 3 times as big as Messe Frankfurt, headquarter of Messe Frankfurt 10 times bigger than the headquarter of Reed Exhibitions, because of the different motivations of these companies. Messe Frankfurt wants to make sure that an Automechanica in Hong Kong looks exactly the same like Automechanica in Frankfurt. They even call it cloning. Reed Exhibitions wants to know exactly that 10% more money comes from Hong Kong than last year. How they do the money, they don't want to understand. And this is why the finance department and the M&A department, that was very high on the list. Okay, I think we skip that slide and we come to the last round before I then hand over again to Nino for the next 2 slides.
ครับก็อย่างเช่นในบริษัทที่มีความสามารถหรือเก่งทางด้าน merger acquisition มากๆอย่างเช่น Reed เมื่อสมัยสัก10 กว่าปีก่อนนะฮะที่ซื้อ MacBrook ซื้อ was it Miller Freeman or
Miller Freeman was an acquisition, yeah, early 2000.
ก็คือว่าเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยนอกจากจะดูในเรื่องของฝั่ง marketing ฝั่ง sales management อะไรต่างๆนานาเนี่ยในเรื่องของ finance ก็จะต้องมีความสามารถนะเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยความสามารถแต่ละบริษัทเนี่ยในเรื่องของความสามารถของแต่ละแผนกเนี่ยอาจจะให้ความสำคัญที่ไม่เหมือนกันนะครับโอเค
I personally very often people think structure is a boring topic. I find structure an interesting topic because you learn so much about the culture of the company when you look at the structure, and you learn so much about the people when you look at the structure. But now, Nino, I left 26 minutes for you. Is that okay?
เดี๋ยวก็ขอเชิญคุณนีโน่ There's a question.
I have a really quick question.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yes, based on your presentations, I saw you mention that the family-owned company, it's quicker and it's easier or something like that. So, but I came from the other industry. It's the family-owned business. It's really hard to acquire and it's really hard to make a move.
Yeah.
Especially in Thai family business.
No, it's absolutely right.
So yeah.
Family-owned businesses are often a nightmare for mergers and acquisitions because it's the decision maker is only one decision maker. Very often the decision is emotional and not analytical. And specifically, I had one colleague in London who is an icon in the exhibition industry. Andrew Shanks is his name. Maybe some of you know the name. He retired 5 years ago. And a British gentleman, but when it comes to German family business, his polite filter didn't work anymore between brain and mouth. He said it's a nightmare to acquire German family-owned businesses because they run always their business since 5 generations. And in Germany, it's very typical that you need to give the company to the next generation. Yeah, you are kind of the bad guy from the family if you sell the company. So it's again, for very good reasons. Actually, I like the culture to pass a company from generation to generation. I sympathize with it, but if you work in M&A, it's a hurdle you hardly can overcome.
Quicker on your presentations.
When the owner does the right decision, then the decision can be done in a minute. That is a
Okay.
yeah. If you get the owner, and that often goes via money, as easy. So all the tradition goes via money. I don't know if you know the company, example outside the exhibition industry, Wella, one of the world-leading hair shampoo companies, actually from my hometown, family-owned since generations, I think easily since 150 years. Family got upset with each other, and then they all sold their shares to bigger companies because they got good offers. So when you offer enough money and you catch the owner, at the right moment, then the decision can bypass very, very quickly. Yeah, this is how I meant it. Nino, 23 minutes now.
Here we go คุณนีโน่ครับขอเสียงตบมือให้คุณเทซี่แล้วก็ต้อนรับคุณนีโน่ครับ Alright คุณนีโน่ CEO of Tarsus Asia you have 23 minutes and 10 seconds
Well, with the translation, it's half the time, so I'll try to speed things up. Welcome back. I want to go a bit more into details about actual structures and decision-making processes and problems that may arise. And I want to start with what I finished with my last presentation, imagining an international organizer buys into your company, but he buys 51%. And 51% is always the scariest part because the seller thinks I'm going to lose everything. I have no more say in my own company. The new partner can overrule me, outgun me, and I'm pretty much just there to, I don't know, consult, but at the end it's their decision. While that is often the fear, if you negotiate wisely and choose your partner correctly, what I just said is absolutely not true. You can actually structure your deal in a way that even with 49 or even with only 20% of the shares, you are still, I wouldn't say in control, but you have veto rights on the most important parts. And as an example, I, for the example, put a structure together whereby the international company buys 60% of your company. So you, assuming you're just one shareholder, you keep 40%. This, as I said, would scare people. Whether it's 51% that you sell or 60% that you sell, you would always feel like I lost the say, to have a say in my own company. Now, I think those 4 words we already explained earlier. A NewCo is just what buyers would often do is they buy your company, but we don't know if there's any legal risk, any legal complaints or lawsuits in the background that we're not aware of. So often what we would do is we would say, we set up a new company and you put all your assets in this company, your website, your database, your staffing and everything. So in case the old company gets sued, that is not part of the NewCo, the new company. So that's just a legal thing to start on a clean slate pretty much. What is more important is the share purchase agreement, which is the first step after you have negotiated, done the DD. The share purchase agreement means here's what we're going to do or get in return for the money that we give you, right? So Khun Kawin sells 60% of his company to me, and I say in the share purchase agreement, if you give me, or once you give me 60% of your company, I will give you the certain things in return. Now, it is a bit more detailed, so what do you give me? Well, you give me the access to those 20,000 email addresses, to the website login, the hosting, the employment contracts and whatnot, and then I pay you the money maybe in 1 installment, 4 installments, whatever. So that's a share purchase agreement. And that is pretty much just like a buying contract. Once the exchange took place, it is pretty much over. So that is like done, deal, dusted. What is more important, and what I want to focus on with this example, is the shareholders agreement or the article of association, depending on whether you buy into an association, whether you buy into a company. But those two set up how we will work together in the future. So now I've paid you the money, you've given me 60% of your company. This is now important on how do we manage the company together in the future. So one example that Tizi mentioned earlier, how do we set the budget? Is the budget set by the company that has 60% or the company that has 40%? How many rounds of negotiation do we have? And so forth. So what I want to focus on exclusively now are those 2 things. You've received your money, you've given over 60% of the share structure, and now how do we operate as partners? Because after all the negotiation and the tough negotiations on money, on control, on timing, on staff, now actually we have to come together and grow the company together, because that's what we signed up for to begin with. So how are we going to do that? Well, to begin with, we can, as I alluded to earlier, we can be in control if we have 51% of the company. But the minority shareholder, whether you have 40% or 49%, can have certain veto rights or reserved matters that need, for example, a 2/3 majority on a board level. Let me give you one simple example. I want to change, or we could make it a reserved matter, that if I change, what's your company logo? Is it bluish? So I say I want to, post-acquisition, I want to change your company logo from blue to red. Now, if I'm the majority shareholder and this has not been specified before, I have all the right to change the color. Now, Kavin could say, I want to make the change of my color for my logo a reserved matter. So it needs, for example, a 2/3 majority to get approved by the shareholders. So now I am stuck. I want to change his color to red. He says, no, I want blue. And even though he only has, in this case, 40%, or he has 49%, he can veto me from changing the color of his logo. So those reserved matters are crucial when you have an international investor come in, because those are the things you want to protect, or even though you have a minority share, you want to have a say in. You don't want someone just to say, change it to red this year, and next year I change it to yellow.
What we call minority protection.
Exactly, yeah. There are many different words for that. In this case, I call it reserved matters, but all I want you to take home is that you can put into any contract reserved matters or protections, limitations of what needs joint agreement, you can say. And I want to share from my experience what the biggest mistakes are, or what you should look out for when you have those discussions with a potential partner. So the first one, I think, is the 3 Ps that I mentioned earlier. Everything you did during the negotiation, the due diligence, are things you should continue to pay attention to in your contract with your new partner. So a common one is, and I continue to have this example with Concavin and Tarsus. We could say, number one, on the hiring part, the staffing. So Concavin, post-acquisition, we could agree, Concavin, he sells to me because he wants to retire, or he sells to me because he wants his nephew to take over the company. Or he wants to say, hey, I just want to be a passive shareholder. I want Nino to run the shows and grow my company. That is something we have discussed prior. And now we need to say, okay, Kavin, Tarsus takes a step back. You continue to be the general manager. This is part of our agreement. And I cannot take you out, unless you do something very evil. I cannot take you out as a general manager, because that is something we agreed on in, let's say, the share purchase agreement or shareholders agreement. However, Concavin could say, look, I don't want Nino or London to be involved in all the nitty-gritty hiring and firing. So we could have a provision, reserved matters, to say, for example, Concavin, for every staff you hire or replace that makes less than 20,000 baht a month, don't even bother telling us. You hire and retrench people as you wish if it's below that threshold. But if you hire someone more expensive, a director of sales, a vice president, a financial director, let us both jointly approve this new person. So often you would have a reserved matter for hiring people above a certain seniority or a monthly salary or annual package, for example. You could also have reserved matters on discounts. You could say every discount less than 30% is up to the general manager to decide. If there is a customer that requires a bigger discount, it needs board approval or both parties to approve that discount. And then something that became quite important during the pandemic, of course, is what happens to the product. COVID hit, borders shut down, a volcano erupts in Europe, Myanmar undergoes a coup. What do? Do we keep our dates? Do we move the event by 6 months? Do we refund the customers? All these things that are product and customer related. You could also say, reserve matter, we want to jointly decide on those things. And it is important, again, all of that should be part of the shareholders' agreement. So before we start working, we should have heckled out all these nitty-gritty details. So we know exactly what to do if a pandemic hits. We need both our shareholders' agreement.
All right, Kunino, you're doing great on timing,
Yeah.
so I'm going to slow you down by doing some translation. ครับก็นะฮะปกติคนเราอาจจะคิดว่าเราขายหุ้นเราไป 60% ตายแล้วจากนี้ไปนี้เราไม่เหลือเซอะไรเลยนะฮะได้แต่นั่งแบบเป็นลูกน้องฝรั่งหรืออะไรอย่างนี้หรือเปล่าหรือนั่งขำๆแล้วก็เดี๋ยวสักวันหนึ่งเขาหวังว่าเราเบื่อแล้วเราก็กลับบ้านไปเองนะจริงมันไม่ใช่เพราะว่าในการตกลงกันเนี่ยมันยังมีนอกจากแค่เรื่องของการซื้อขายหุ้นแล้วเนี่ยมันยังมี shareholder agreement นะครับซึ่งในนั้นเนี่ยถึงแม้ว่าเราเนี่ยจะถือแค่ 40% หรือ 35 หรือถือแค่ 20 หรืออะไรก็ตามเนี่ยแต่ใน shareholder agreement ตอนซื้อกันเนี่ยได้ระบุว่าเราได้มีเรื่องที่เป็น reserve matter หรือเป็นminority protection เนี่ยในเรื่องอะไรบ้าง Can I have the next slide please เช่นนะครับในเรื่องของการจ้างคนนะฮะอาจจะมีบอกว่าถ้าเกิดว่าเป็นตำแหน่งตั้งแต่ manager ขึ้นไปนะครับจะต้องมีการ agree กันทั้งสองฝ่ายนะครับทั้งฝ่าย majority คือฝรั่งที่ถือ60สมมตินะเราถือ40นะครับหรือในเรื่องของตัวงานนะฮะและวันที่และเวลาไม่ใช่ว่าอยู่ดีๆเขาเป็น majority แล้วเขาจะสามารถที่จะ make decision ได้โดยที่ไม่ได้รับความเห็นชอบจากเราไม่ได้นะฮะคือมันจะต้องได้รับความเห็นชอบด้วยกันนะครับหรือในเรื่องของงบประมาณต่างๆนะฮะเขาก็ต้องได้รับความเห็นชอบจากเราไม่งั้นก็คือไม่ผ่านนะครับเรามี veto right นะครับราคาที่เราจะขายต่อตารางเมตร discount ส่วนลดต่างๆนะครับหรืออะไรต่างๆเนี่ยคือมันสามารถพูดง่ายๆสัญญาที่ดีเนี่ยมันจะ protect ฝั่งผู้ขายได้มากทีเดียวนะฮะไม่ใช่ว่าเราขายไปแล้วนี่คือเราแบบเขาจะยังไงก็ได้นะครับโอเค
Okay. Now the next 5 points are the most important ones because they lead often to the biggest frustration on the seller side and to the biggest potential. They have the biggest potential to lead through to an actual fight or argument between both shareholders. So the number one is dividend distribution. Casey mentioned earlier that those contracts that we sign are sometimes 100, 200 pages long because the lawyers put in all the eventualities. So those are the 5 points I think you should pay special attention to and have a common understanding with your partner on what this means. What I see often is that somewhere hidden in the terms and conditions, the buyer would put in a provision to say, for the first 3 or 5 years or whatever, we're not going to pay a dividend, right? So let's say every year we make $1 million profit, which would mean Khun Kavin gets 40%, I get 60%, but I could put into my legal framework, for the first 3 years we don't pay any dividend. Why? Because maybe I want to use that to further grow the show, or I don't want to get the money out. I want to use it for other things, maybe potential acquisitions. But what I see, what most sellers often forget is this in the long run will be the much more important part of your personal finances. So if Kavin sells his company to me for a multiple of 8, for example, he gets 8 times the EBITDA for, let's say, the 60% he sells to me. And let's just say that is $3 million. So here, Kavin, here's $3 million. Thank you very much for your share. Now I own 60% of the company. What is more important in the long run, the 40%, what I would always make sure when I sell my business is that I have a default dividend distribution in my contract. Meaning, every year, both shareholders agree, we will pay out 90, I'm just making an arbitrary number, 90% of all the profits will be paid proportionately to the shareholders. Unless both parties agree to change that. So instead of saying, we need both parties' agreement to pay a dividend, I would do it the other way around. We will always pay the dividend unless we both agree we don't want to pay this year. Maybe because the pandemic hit, we only made $2 of profit, so let's not bother, let's postpone it for next year. And this part, the dividend, if you think of the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years for this show, is the much more important part, because this will amount to a lot more money than the original price I paid to invest in Kunkawin's business. And this also means that I could pass on my 40% to my kids, to my nephew, to my wife, or whatever, so that money, that dividend, will be paid every year as long as the company is profitable indefinitely. So what I would always advise is put a default dividend distribution of, let's say, 90% of all the profits into your agreements. That I often see is a big issue. The second one is if I invest into Kunkawin's business, I run his retail show together with him and we do it. And then the next week I announce Tarsus to bring Dubai Air Show to Bangkok. And Kunkawin said, Nino, why do I not know of this? I said, oh, don't worry about it. I do this with another partner. He said, well, what about we do it together? I'm your local partner. I'm in Thailand with you. So exclusivity on launches is something I think you should also negotiate with your partner. So if Tarsus brings other shows into Thailand, am I your default partner? Or do I have an option to be your default partner? Vice versa, if Kawin wants to bring a show to Cambodia, is Tarsus the default partner? So those are things I think you should put into your contracts, because further down the line, once I've paid you for your shares and you've given me your shares, those will lead to conflicts if they have not been discussed and agreed prior. The next one I mentioned earlier is reporting, which is more the administration. Do we need 4 board meetings a year or 2? Is 1 enough? Can we do it just via email, Zoom, WhatsApp, you name it, or does it have to be physically? Minor point, but there are some organizations, some listed companies, some German companies, some British companies that are just a pain to work with because the bureaucracy and the administrative part is absolutely burdensome. So sometimes you have 2, 3 reports you have to do per week for read just the internal procedures. From what I hear from friends is if you want to launch a new show, you need a preliminary launch paper, and that needs to go back and forth, and a document of 10 pages has to be produced, and 20 people will look at it, and it takes like half a year before you try to put up a website. So check those things in reportings. Hey, if we want to launch a new show in Cambodia, what would be the steps? What do I have to do to get the buy-in from the HQ, for example? So those are things I think you should also look into when it comes to launches, sales reports, finance reports, to not be surprised by bureaucracy. But even if you get $1 million, $2 million, $10 million for your business, but every week you need to produce 3 reports that you never had to do before, you will be frustrated until you retire. So sounds like a little thing, but ask prior. What's the communication line here? What's the reporting? The next one are recharges and show services. Some organizers would put in the fine print that they say, we will charge you 2-3% of the revenue for our general services, for our agents that work across the globe, for our, in this case, sales group, for example, for our centralized sales team, for our marketing team, for our global finance and accounting team, you name it. So some organizers will charge you for certain services they provide. And this is not being sneaky, they are very upfront with that. But if the value is not there, or you don't quite understand, well, it's just 2-3%, I guess that's okay because I'll get a lot of money. Those are the points that will later frustrate you. So they charge you for a service and you think, well, yes, you do the accounting, but you would do that regardless of whether I'm your partner or I'm not your partner. So recharges, show service fees, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 5%. Those often lead to annoyances if the service is not there, or saying, I thought we were a partner, like I'm not allowed to charge that for my local regional Southeast Asian sales team, but you're charging that for your HQ in Germany or in England or wherever.
Is this beef, is this wrong or introduced or it has been done for a while?
Often this is from the very beginning, and it's nothing like secretive or hidden. It's just that they would say, hey, we would charge, going forward, once we are partners, we would charge a revenue percentage, 5%, for certain services.
Is it a normal standard, or is it just depending on some buyers?
Depending on the buyer. Like,
Okay. Not all.
Not all, no. Some
Any
do that
specific-
all the time.
Any
That's standard
specific
practice.
country that do that, or it depends again?
The Brits, some of the Brits do that. The Germans, not so much. And it really depends because, for example, for Tarsus, we don't charge that, but we would always put a provision in that if I acquire a company, the new finance director should be appointed by me, for example, right? So, and yes, the cost will be part of our joint venture. But I don't charge, let's say, top line percentages. So it really depends on the organizer. Someone says, I charge you from the top line for certain services. Others say, I will put certain people into your company. Tarsus, for example, a finance director. And other people will say, could say, well, let's get rid of half of your team because we already have an existing team. Often the case in China, for example, that you just merge two businesses. And you say, oh, I don't need those 20 salespeople. I have my own salespeople. So post-acquisition, we'll just fire half of your team, take the best ones, and integrate them into our existing teams. Could happen. It shouldn't catch you off guard or by surprise if you have discussed that prior to signing. I want to end on the point that the buyer always has your best interest at heart, because for us, as someone who acquires and invests, it only makes sense if the show post-acquisition grows faster than before. Now, if you could do that without us, we wouldn't even be talking. If you think there's a value of any organizer joining you, then the growth should accelerate, as I mentioned in the previous talk, through cost savings, through better sales, to optimization, to better buyer programs, and nitty-gritty little things. However, even if companies grow, even if they are 10, 20 years later much bigger, more successful than when you were a local organizer, those things will still frustrate you immensely. I mentioned in the previous talk, you always had a company car that was paid for by the company. Later, you sell, and all of a sudden, your new investor says, hey, company car, no more. That's our corporate policy. And you're like, you just got millions of dollars, but it still annoys you. Why the change? I always had a company car, and now I don't. So don't only look at the price that you get paid. Look into all these nitty-gritty little details, because they will haunt you for decades to come.
Thank you, Nino. I must say, he's a really nice buyer, isn't he? That he's telling us all these tricks as we are supposed to be selling. You know, I'll just do a really quick translation of this. Okay, one question, can you?
Yeah, really quick questions again. So, based on your experience, for example, I'm the local PEO. I mean, for the real local, like domestic or something. And my valuations, I realize that is not that much. And I offer you like, okay, in 3 years, 5 years, I'm gonna be I have my exit strategy to be the IPO, and you have a right to sell it at the IPO. You have a right to buy it at the IPO price, for example, or are there any financial vehicle like convertible debenture or something like this within this industry? I'm not really familiar with this industry.
In our industry, not so much. Whether like Tarsus 23, 24 years ago was brought to the stock market, what today would be considered a SPAC. So, but it hardly ever happens. So there are a handful of listed company organizers, companies that are listed worldwide. It is rare. So today it's privately owned companies I would almost say PE-owned companies and listed companies are almost balanced at the moment.
Yeah, it seems like the owners buying back, like DMG, Lord Rothermere bought back all the shares.
FE, Hive, yeah, that also takes place. That's the divorce part that we talked about earlier. But I don't think that this, then I would just say, well, then I'll just wait 5 years and buy it then.
But you're not going to have the IPO price. So I give you the right at the IPO price before I enter the stock market.
I don't see, I'm not sure, I don't see that any organizer went public in the last
Yeah, I know that.
20 years. So it's very unlikely for us to do that or for us to bank on that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
ครับขออนุญาตสรุปนิดนึงข้อ4เนี่ยสำคัญมากผมคิดว่าเป็นสิ่งที่ทุกคนคุณคือเวลาคนเราคิดถึงขายกิจการเราคิดโอ้โหสมมติว่าฉัน EBITDA มา20นะคูณด้วย10โห200ขาย60ฉันได้120ล้านแล้วก็ตื่นเต้นแบบทำแต่อันนั้นแต่มันยังมีข้ออื่นที่สำคัญอย่างเช่นนโยบายการปันผลนะสมมติว่าถ้าเกิดผู้ซื้อเขาบอกว่าแล้วพอเซ็นกันปุ๊บเขาบอกไม่ปันผลเลย5ปีไม่ปันผลเลย5ปีเนี่ยสมมติทุกปีกำไรปีละ10ล้าน20ล้านนะฮะแบ่งกันเราถือ 40% ก็คือปีละ40นะ40ล้านแล้วต่อไปอีกหลายๆ10ปีเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยเราอาจจะต้องเป็นฝั่งที่บอกว่าเราเป็นผู้ขายนะเราเป็น minority แต่เราบอกเลยว่าทุกปีเนี่ยขอให้มีนโยบายการปันผลเนี่ย 90% ถูกไหมฮะเพื่อที่เราจะได้เงินนั้นมาทุกปีแม้เราไปแล้วขึ้นสวรรค์ไปแล้วก็ยังเป็นมรดกให้กับลูกต่อไปได้นี่เหรอฮะอันนี้เป็นข้อสำคัญ exclusivity เป็นเรื่องสำคัญมากแม้ว่าเขาเป็น majority ซื้อหุ้นส่วนใหญ่ของเราไปแล้วแต่วันหลังเนี่ยถ้าเกิดว่าเขาจะเอางานใหม่มา launch ในเมืองไทยหรือถ้าเกิดเราฉลาดกว่านั้นนะเราบอกว่าเราขอเป็น Southeast Asia ด้วยได้ไหมนึกออกไหมฮะทุกครั้งที่เขาเอา launch อะไรงานมาเนี่ยเรามีเอี่ยวด้วยในงานนั้นๆไม่ใช่ว่าอยู่ดีๆเขาบอกอ๋อแต่ฉันเอางานใหม่มาแต่อันนี้ไม่เกี่ยวกับเธอนะไม่ได้นะฮะเราไม่มีเอี่ยวไม่ได้เพราะนี่มัน territory ของเรานะครับหรือว่าในเรื่อง reporting ก็จริงๆผมมีเพื่อนหลายคนที่แบบว่าแต่ก่อนเคยเป็นเจ้าชีวิตของตัวเองเนาะพอไปอยู่ under ใครหรือทำกับใครชีวิตนี้สารนิดเดี๋ยวนี้ไอไม่ได้ทำอะไรเลยวันๆไอแต่นั่งทำแต่ report เพราะว่ามี report หลายอย่าง finance project อะไรต่างๆนานาคือเป็นชีวิตแบบเบื่อมากเบื่อชีวิตมากรวยแต่แบบวันๆนั่งทำ report อะไรอย่างเงี้ยนะ so มันก็มีหลายๆเรื่องที่ต้องพิจารณาโอเค that's it for me
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nino. Before I go to the next slide, I really want to thank Nino. As I said before, and he stepped in on that session. He was just presenting in the last 30 minutes. And I think the insight was amazing, and I learned a lot from him. So thanks again, Nino, for your two presentations. Slight change. We are running a little bit behind in the time. We have now a coffee break, but instead of a 15-minute coffee break, can you please go out, bring your coffee, and come back with your coffee in around 5 minutes, and the fruits and the food will be served at the table, so that we shorten the coffee break a little bit to around 5 minutes, and then we continue with the last session. Fabian is here from Luther Law Firm. He will be the guest speaker of our next session, and we meet back in 5 minutes in the room. So have fun.